So thank you all for hopping on. It's really great to see the interest of organisations and fleets looking to transition to electric. Hopefully by the end of this, you would have gauged a bit of an understanding around the key steps to transition. And I've also introduced some cool integrations for specific companies that we've worked on over the last year, which we're finding is becoming more and more prevalent, as well as a case study right at the end to kind of bring everything together. To start, I'd just like to introduce myself. So my name's Austin. I'm the National Sales Manager for EVSE Australia. I have a mechanical engineering background, but I'm very passionate about the renewable energy industry and pretty much everything sustainability. I've worked with EVSE for the last 3 years and helped deploy EV charging solutions across Australia and New Zealand.
Awesome. And my name's Matthew. So I'm the Business Development Manager for New South Wales, and I work with Austin, and I've been with the EVSE for the last 2 years. So I help fleets and all companies across Australia help to deploy charging solutions that help them transition to electric.
Fantastic. So if any of you have any questions throughout the webinar, please just submit them in the chat box and we can get to them at the end. Also, the presentation is being recorded, so you will receive this recording either tomorrow or then the next business day. So just, all of it will be sent to you in due time, and you can have a copy of the presentation, sure. All right, beautiful, let's get into it. So just a brief introduction around EVSE. So we've been around since 2015, which is not that long in terms of businesses, but for the EV industry, we're one of the oldest and most experienced in providing our solutions. Our mission is pretty simple. We were founded to help decarbonise the way we move and accelerate the uptake of electric vehicles in Australia. I think since 2015, we've helped over 100 plus of the largest organisations in Australia transition their fleets, and that's through our turnkey solution offering. So we do everything from feasibility assessments in understanding how much power you have available and what we can do for your site, to supplying the hardware and the software, installing it, and then providing that ongoing support.
Yeah, just like Austin said, our role in this industry is essentially making that transition to electric as easy as possible through those main 4 points that we're going to go over through this presentation.
Yeah, and you'll find our way of working is we work through partnerships. So allowing you to have the infrastructure to essentially scale out your charging fleet, and then we kind of grow with you. And that's what we've found to work quite well since we've been around. This slide, it's a bit different, but I wanted to put it in here because it gives a bit of an idea around where we're headed. On the left-hand side, funnily enough, this is around Easter back in 1900s, but this is New York City, where the majority of the transportation there was horse and cart. And you can see in that red circle on the left image, there's one motorised vehicle. And what we saw from looking back then is within 13 years, at 1913, around 80% of the population had adopted motorised vehicles because of all the benefits they provided. One was, the ease of travel, work, logistics, all of that basically improved society, and it saw such a rapid shift to more motorised petrol vehicles. This is to kind of give an idea of where we're headed in the 21st century towards electric. I think the next 10 years will be some of the biggest 10 years of the EV transition, where we'll start seeing a huge amount of light vehicle fleets begin to transition to electric, as well as we're now seeing enter the market in Australia a lot of heavy duty electric trucks and buses. So the direction is there. It's going to be pretty exciting over the next couple of years.
And so, like I said, those 4 main points. So today we're going to walk through these elements, and this is what helps you effectively plan your EV infrastructure, so you have a good understanding for the long term, and really help you get the right hardware, the right software, the right solution.
Yep, that's exactly right. So there's 4 key steps. One is understanding the right AC and DC hardware. The second is understanding your infrastructure at your sites. Thirdly is understanding and being able to have a smart software solution to track and monitor everything. And then lastly, Most importantly is that ongoing support and maintenance piece, which you're investing all this value and money into an EV charging infrastructure. You want to make sure that it's kept, maintained, and supported for the long term.
Cool. And just like Austin said then, and so when you're beginning this journey, we understand that there's a lot to consider. So the first step would be to understand what sort of hardware is right for you. Is it AC charging, DC charging, or perhaps a mix of both? So yeah, we understand that every fleet is unique. So there's always different needs, and it's very important to understand from your perspective that use case of how you use your vehicles. So we can essentially understand, or your EV charging provider can understand what are the right charges for your fleet, and what's the right infrastructure. So
absolutely right. So I think the first question you need to ask yourself is, how do you operate your vehicles? What this is asking is, like, how far do those vehicles drive a day in kilometers? Are the majority of your fleet take-home vehicles, or do you leave them parked overnight at the depots? Additional question would be, what type of vehicles? Are they heavy electric trucks and buses, or are they light passenger vehicles?
Yeah. Like, for example, if your fleets are on the road also like most of the day, and you need to consider as well, how long are they typically have time to charge for? So so if they're on the road most of the day, like I said, you're looking at a short sort of period to charge. Then when we can look at DC charging and having a quick charge to make sure you're on the road again. Alternatively, some sites may not have that and have time to charge overnight, which is more common. And that time to charge overnight is where you're looking at AC charging. So a slower charge, about 60 k's of range per hour, but it's enough once a week to top up a vehicle and keep going.
That's exactly right. I think it's all down to dwell time. So you know how your vehicles operate. It's how long do they park for? Like, what's their dwell time? Like Matt said, quick 2-hour turnover, or is it 12 hours overnight? And then lastly, understanding how many EVs you're looking to get now, and how many two to 3 years down the track keeps you with the ability to plan with the end in mind. And I think that's extremely important. You want to make sure that the infrastructure you're putting in is scalable, it's modular, and it's future-proofed. You don't want to have to be ripping out charges 3 years down the track because they've been superseded. So really important in terms of the infrastructure piece and understanding how smart they are and where that hardware brand is going in the future.
Yeah, and just like that, let's say we do understand the operational needs and patterns of your vehicles. So that's when we can start to make the right recommendation, or and understand the infrastructure that's fit for purpose, and so we can future-proof that fleet. So the right mix of hardware, and we can also understand even sometimes if it's AC and DC, that charging infrastructure is dependent on your type of fleet. So we had a customer once, large vehicles, so heavy electric trucks, and the batteries were obviously a lot bigger, as you know, and they take longer to charge. So that's when we really needed to look at DC charging and making sure they're on the road again.
Absolutely right, but like you've got electric trucks, heavier batteries, larger batteries, so heavier DC infrastructure, but that's not the same for a council who has a fleet of pool vehicles. They don't drive those vehicles very far per day. I think the average kilometers on a vehicle per day is 40 kilometers. So that is a quick, easy, slow charge overnight. They have a suitable amount of time to charge, and in that way you can have lower powered AC charging infrastructure. You can scale that out at your depots and be able to accommodate your fleet now and for the future. I think a good rule of thumb in terms of dwell time is if the vehicles are parked there for 4 hours or more, you typically look at AC charging. If the vehicles drive around all day and come in and park for 2 hours, you need to fill that 400 kilometer range battery up in that 2-hour period. So you're most likely looking at DC infrastructure. But what we would say is take a holistic approach, like design for both the vehicle side as well as for the infrastructure side. Sometimes we even find that putting both a DC and then backed up by a lot of AC chargers provides a good combination where most vehicles will charge slowly. And then if you do need an emergency charge, you have that rapid charging station available. One thing to note as well, I think predominantly for the heavier trucks as they enter the market and for those fleet operators is understanding the site layout and understanding how you're going to place the charging stations so that the cables can reach the ports of the vehicles. It's important for both light and heavy and understanding if it's a wall mountable or a floor mountable solution. But if heavy trucks back into the chargers and they have a 8-meter length, then you need to make sure that those cables can reach to plug in. Also understanding where the ports are located on the vehicle is important too. So there's a bunch of different aspects around the operation of your vehicles, but also at base, how is the actual setup and how is the parking structured? All right, brilliant. So we just want to touch on this user experience piece. What we're finding over the last 2 years is that the user experience from both the hardware as well as the support side is becoming more and more important. We tend to look at infrastructure that, like charging stations, that have LED indicators that flash green when something's working and red when something's not. But more importantly, so they have a real-time display, so an inbuilt LCD screen to be able to give you that visual feedback on your charging session. We find that a lot of fleets, especially when they're starting their journey, those fleet drivers, it's their first time using a charging station. So you want to make sure that that first time is seamless and it's positive. Because if someone has a bad initial experience, they can kind of latch onto that and then associate EV charging negatively. So it's extremely important to make sure when you're looking at a charging brand and your charging provider can provide a good experience from the hardware side.
And sorry, part of that hardware user experience is also the support. And like it says on the slide, metal chargers is also suitable. We've found often in our experience for outdoor applications. So in the rain, in the sun, in the weather, a metal charger is the way to go. Generally speaking, and then moving on, if there is something wrong with the charger, part of the user experience is to understand who do you call. What happens when something breaks down? The last thing you want to do is contact another company, a third party that's based in another country. So we want to look at how easy, how accessible is that support? Is it on the side of the charger like it is here, and that sort of aspect.
Absolutely, and then I think lastly to touch on is cable holders. Very simple, but it's a very simple idea. Not many chargers out there have it. So the purpose of it is so that you can have cables wrapped around it so they're not on the ground and they're not causing a tripping hazard. But that's just something we've found from our experience and from what our customers want back in terms of feedback is what they want.
And so a major component to this is, of course, the actual infrastructure and the installation. So the operational needs, like Austin said earlier, with the trucks and also positioning the bays. So that sort of thing you want to understand when an electrician comes to site and you'll have the chance to speak to him. You want to determine the right mix of charging infrastructure, and of course with your EV charging provider, understand the design of the sort of chargers that you want to have in.
Absolutely. So I think it comes down to in terms of the infrastructure, site selection is extremely important. Selecting your sites that have available power, as well as where the switchboards are located close to the charging stations, can help save costs and reduce complexity for you. For commercial sites, we always recommend performing assessments where we can understand, or your provider can understand how much power you have, where it's all located, and be able to scope it all up for you. After the site selection, so say you've nailed down one, site assessments are important. Like I said, you want to be able to go to site and go, okay, how much power do you have in the switchboard? How much capacity and space is there available? As well as what's the internet connectivity at the charger location? How far away is the charger? And is there any civil works or trenching involved? From my experience, anything that involves civil works, anything that involves trenching inflates the installation cost and can help, and that can mean it might be prohibitive to put those chargers in.
Yeah, so like Austin said, sort of asking your charging provider for a detailed engineering design.
Yeah.
And you can easily refer back as you look to expand on that design or on your fleet. So in the future, you can involve that engineering sort of aspect, and you have those proposals and schematics ready to go.
Absolutely. And on the right-hand side, this is a bit of an example or a bit of a case study on our work with Optus headquarters at Macquarie Park in Sydney. The top of the image is a schematic of the wiring diagrams of the charging stations. So they wanted around 10 wall box chargers for their employees in their car parking area. So that schematic details the switchboard, details the type of circuit breakers, the wiring and the isolator switches. And then from there, we actually developed a 3D render. So the second image there is a 3D render of the site of what it would look like with the charging stations installed. And then the third image at the bottom, that is the real life example. That's the real life example. So it's essentially to provide our partner a visualization on what it will look like, so they can be sure now, as well as with the schematics, they can understand how to expand in future. Awesome. So like I mentioned at the beginning, over the last year, we were involved in a range of different solutions where we think it's becoming more prevalent. One of these different solutions or requirements was accommodating for disabilities. So we provided charging infrastructure in partnership with Actu-AGL down in Canberra for the Parliament House. What they wanted was we implemented 60 charging stations. Some of them are for the fleet, some of them are also for public. But for that public site, they wanted a disability bay where the charging station should be installed at acceptable height, which they were, that they wanted wheelchair access space enabled. So you had to accommodate for that, as well as general things like enough lighting, making sure the cable lengths and the weight was sufficient and acceptable. And then lastly, making sure that there's different ways to sign on or scan on to a charging session. So we developed that and it was a success, but that's just one of the examples. The second one would be integrating with building management systems. With your provider, you want to make sure that because you might have your own internal system that you want everything to pull data to so you can manage from there. And that's fine. You just need to make sure with your hardware provider that they have the capability to do so. For Allianz Stadium, we implemented 4 Ocular dual port chargers, and using a Modbus connection, we were able to connect with Allianz Football Stadium's BMS. So they're able to pull the data and push values and be able to understand from their internal system what's going on. And lastly, relating to fire safety. So I know there's a lot of questions around fire safety in industry, especially over the last 2 years. Firstly, we follow all the EV Fire Safe and NCC guidelines and recommendations. But this is an example for the Queensland government where it was in an underground car park, which is generally where you start looking at fire-related measures. And what we were able to do was we were able to recommend and install a remote switch, so a master isolation switch, as you can see in that image. That red button pushed, it will be able to turn off all the charging stations in an emergency. We also can work with fire engineers. So if there needs to be if they'd like a full assessment on their underground car park and understand how many charges they're allowed to put in and other measures, we can get you in touch with fire engineers who can provide that consultation. Happy to answer any questions related to that at the end of the preso as well. I expect there'll be a few.
And also to touch on that installation component, we look at load management technology, which I'm sure many of you have heard before. It's very important as fleets look to expand and overcome the main limitation, which is building electrical infrastructure. So sometimes buildings have only so much power to work with, and then if you've got to increase the amount of charges, it becomes an issue. But there are a couple of ways to overcome that, and that's with load management technology. So as you can see on the slide, the first of that is static load. So we actually limit each charger to a certain amount, so it won't pass that limit. So we'll only run at maybe 80% charge speed, and that way it ensures that the electrical infrastructure is safe. And the more common one is the next one, which is dynamic load management, and that's where you see we place a load essentially a load controller onto the board that's being monitored, and from there the charges will actually down rate if it senses that the building power is quite high that day, or essentially if there's any risk of any
Absolutely. Like if there's a risk that it's
Yeah.
going to trip, the load management constantly monitors it and will downrate the charges if necessary. I think load management technology, it's extremely beneficial, and we're implementing it more and more, and there's more and more of this technology coming out in the market, which is great. Generally, you see it for apartments where they're looking at electrifying every single bay, so they need some type of load control to be able to accommodate charges in every bay. But also for fleets as they start to scale out their fleets for all your council sites or all your business sites, you need to be able to, one, protect your building's infrastructure, two, be able to scale out your infrastructure as well. And load management helps increase the amount of EV charges by fourfold. So you can put 4 times as many charges in using load control. The major benefit is also that you don't have to upgrade your building switchboards, which can save you a lot of costs, as well as extended lead times with your energy provider. We understand that a lot of buildings, they're 10 and 20 years old, and when they were built and power was allocated, they didn't have enough. They didn't account for EV charging. So that's where this kind of load management technology is required. And the great thing is, so we've worked with the CSIRO to develop this technology to be able to implement in sites and connect to a wide range of charging stations. We've got the load control on both the software side, both static and dynamic, and then also on the hardware side, just to provide that flexibility to the customers.
And the next step, like we said, is software. So the part that sort of ties it all together, the hardware and installation. Now you have a software that essentially allows you to track the energy usage, whether it's charging at home or at your depot. We understand that majority of charging is done at homes, but oftentimes that may not be the case. So the infrastructure requirements need to have, you need to understand how much power you're using. Essentially, is what the software's value comes ties together.
So with the software platform, the platforms in general are extremely valuable. For any fleet manager, we recommend it because it gives you the ability to understand what's going on with your charging at your sites. It gives you full visibility over the status and the usage of the charging stations to ensure that there's minimal downtime and maximum efficiency at your fleet depots. The first point on the screen is charging session tracking. So you can track when somebody plugs in, you can see who it is, or you can actually understand which vehicle registration plate is plugging in and understand what time, how long they've charged for, and how much energy they've consumed. And then you can do all that reporting on the back end of the software platforms where you can understand energy in kilowatt hours per day, week, month, year, but also average charging durations and the number of sessions that you're having versus time. So that gives you a bit of an understanding around demand. If your charges are getting hammered, you might need to add some more to be able to account for that. But also it gives you understanding around optimizing your vehicle's charging behavior. If your vehicles are operationally sensitive and you need them to be out on the road all the time, then the software is beneficial because it can tell you how long their idle time is. So say they've finished charging and they idle for 30 minutes. That's time where you could actually get that vehicle out on the road and then another vehicle could be plugged in its place. So it helps in terms of that operation and optimization.
Yeah. And an example of a company we've worked with is actually AutoNexus. So it's a logistics company for vehicles, and they've had multiple sites across Australia. So this software solution gave them the ability to monitor and all their charging sessions from a single dashboard. So it ensures that minimal downtime and gives them like that full oversight of all the data and stats that they need to make a decision.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's important, right? The value it gives is it gives you visibility. It reduces that kind of gap in knowledge. But also there's a lot of power with the dashboards. You can have multi-tiered management where you might want national coverage over all your charges, but you can allocate statewide coverage to your state managers and then site-wide coverage to your site managers. So there's a lot of flexibility with the software platforms. Also making sure that it's OCPP, so you're not locked in, is extremely important. That just means that the one software can work on a number of different charging stations and brands. And same way with the hardware, right? You want to make sure that the hardware doesn't lock you in, that works with a number of different software providers. Just like kind of how you have your mobile phone like your iPhone and it works with Telstra, Vodafone, Optus. It's the same type of concept. And then lastly is around home integration. So for fleets, you might start, or when you're at the beginning of your journey, it might make sense to start at your depots, which is fine. But we're finding people now 2 to 3 years down the track of electrifying, they want to track that data and that electricity usage at the fleet driver's home. And so we realized that the fuel card experience and being able to replicate that is fundamental. We want to be able to provide fleet managers with the confidence to kind of take those next steps in electrifying their fleet, which is why we've developed a smart charging solution that allows fleet managers to track employees when they charge at home, as well as when they drive to their depots and charge. It's all through the back-end dashboard. And how it works is you would install a smart charger at your home, you'd put a software platform on top, and then the fleet driver would have an RFID card that they tap on, and you can understand that that's, okay, this is this vehicle, it's charging here. We can effectively reimburse you for that electricity you've cost. So that is one method. There's a bunch of different ways for home tracking, but that's a successful way we've been able to implement and we've seen. Beautiful.
And the other aspect, this is the fourth one, and we understand that having infrastructure there is important, but also the ongoing support and maintenance, like I mentioned earlier. So if you want to have that guarantee that your investment's going to go sound, this is sort of crucial to your business.
100%.
So it's very important to make sure that you're maintaining and monitoring these charges. So we understand that it's business critical. So
that's exactly right. And so these are kind of 4 major points that you need to consider with your charging provider in the way that, what do they provide? So if something goes wrong, what's the process, which is very important. If your fleets are business critical and you want them back to start charging your trucks or your like emergency vehicles or your just standard fleet vehicles in a day or half a day, you need to understand what the steps are. Simple steps would be, there's a sticker on the side of the charger. It has a phone number. It has an email address. You contact that, and then the support is able to provide or facilitate support over the phone. And if that doesn't work, then your provider has spare parts available to come to site and fix it. So understanding the steps, understanding if there's spare parts available or if there's like a 2-month lead time, that can also be quite an important factor. I think also around the training and education. So making sure that they have FAQ docs for first-time users, as well as for the back-end platform on how to use the software. What do the different messages mean on the screens? For us, we can hold webinars, we can hold training sessions, and we kind of walk you through it because we understand that it's more of a knowledge development. A lot of this is a completely new industry with completely new technology, and it's understandable that you have a lot of questions.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, in regards to the actual support team, we want to ensure that calling internationally is something that's minimised. Definitely in terms of technical assistance. So local Australian support is key. To making sure the chargers are back and running on time, the spare parts available. There's a maintenance agreement that actually backs that up. So a lot of EV charging providers have that. Please ensure that you have a good look and that allows the vehicles, the chargers, to be inspected yearly to ensure that they're fully operational, 100% safe, and you have something peace of mind if something does go wrong.
Exactly, because it's all about risk aversion. You want to make sure whoever you're choosing lowers the risk. You can make sure that if something works or something happens, it can be fixed properly. I think understanding the warranties of the chargers, also around the service level agreements, so the steps taken and how long for support within those service level agreements, having a look at that will also allow you to make, I guess, a holistic approach to who you choose and why. Okay, beautiful. So those are the 4 steps, right? So you firstly need to understand how you operate your vehicles, what type they are, and be able to determine the hardware. And then having a look at your infrastructure of your sites and understanding, do you have enough capacity? How large of a scope of works and how much will it cost you? And which site makes the most sense? understanding the software side and how that can impact and how it can benefit you, and then the support, because you're really providing an investment. You want to make sure it's supported well for the next 10 years, 15 years, and so on. This is a case study that I want to walk through in a couple of steps of what we've done with Sixt Australia. So Sixt came to us 2 years ago in 2022 with a goal where they wanted to transition half of their vehicle fleet to electric. They have about 9,000 vehicles in their fleet, so it's a huge ambition. But they came to us because they knew about the vehicles, but they had a big gap around, what hardware is available, how fast does that charge, power-wise, how much power do they take, how much power do they have at their sites. So they had a huge gap around that, and I think part of what we provide is that turnkey solution to make it as seamless for Sixt, to remove that friction and allow them to achieve their goals. So we partnered with Sixt in being able to identify all of their sites and implement charging infrastructure. So this is a bit of an example. I've taken out a lot of the data, but to give you an idea, it was multiple states. They gave us about 30 sites, or I think 30 sites to be able to assess, because they didn't know if they could put infrastructure in them or not. From there, we were able to assess each site with our experienced electricians. And what you can see on the screen is that some of the sites are suitable with power available, but other sites needed substantial upgrades, and we needed to liaise with the stakeholders, which is, potential landlords. So landlords could be another hold-up which you have to negotiate with. And then other sites just needed a simple power upgrade. So what we did was we were able to recommend, this is the type of charging stations that will work for your fleet at each of your sites that you've told us. This is the power that you have available, or perhaps you don't have available. And then we were able to work from there. So from there, we essentially started an initial pilot site with the sites that were easy. And that gave Sixt the confidence in being able to understand the process, the learnings involved, and to give them a bit of a leg up in understanding, how the vehicles work at their car rental sites, and getting the people down on the ground comfortable and familiar with the technology, because it is a bit of a learning curve. For some of these site assessments, we did load logging and analysis to exactly identify how much power was available, and then we're able to implement the right technology. So this is a bit of an example of some of the work we've done. So to give you an idea, this is one site where they installed a 60 kilowatt DC charger and then a 22 kilowatt AC charger. So they had that mixture, rapid fast charging, backed up by some slow AC charging stations. What you can see those, we assessed the site. We actually implemented a dedicated switchboard for the EV chargers. And then this site needed load management as well, because they wanted to be able to scale it out. So we implemented load management controllers, which is that second image that connects to the switchboard, monitors the power throughout the day, and then also connects to the chargers to downrate them if there's not enough power available. And this was applied and essentially replicated a range of their 20 plus sites across Australia, with some of the sites still going through that application process for energy upgrades. Because that does take quite a long time, and it differs depending on the states. So it's good to keep that in mind as well. And lastly, so with their implementation of their infrastructure, they also had the smart software platform called Exploren. This platform allows them to visualize their charging sessions, to be able to understand how many chargers they have at different sites, to be able to understand what's going on. If anything's down, how can we fix it immediately? But gives them reporting. So Sixt actually utilized the reporting to gauge how much electricity they're consuming, the idle times, so they can optimize their vehicles to get back out on the road and earn more revenue. And then they implemented multi-tiered management, where there was national coverage with different levels of tiers below from state to site coverage. And then lastly, we provided them RFID cards, which essentially replicates to the registration plate. So on the back end, you can actually understand the vehicle's charging behavior. And we simply just put those on the key rings dedicated to the cars, and it works like a charm. From this image, you can see that the difference between AC and DC, as well as the energy usage throughout a month. So it gives you a wide range of understanding and helps them transition effectively to electric. And that partnership is still ongoing.
Cool. And to sort of summarize just what Austin's just said, so EVSE, we work in partnerships in providing a turnkey charging solution to all of our partners across country. So we are the leader in EV charging solutions in Australia in our ability to focus on that user experience, the engineering aspect of the consultation, as well as the support long term, including that technology that's really cutting edge because it is a new industry. And just to summarize, we do that hardware, the software, the installation, and the support ongoing. So yeah.
So I guess that is pretty much the last slide of the webinar. I hope you all enjoyed it. We can answer your questions now, but feel free to also put your emails into the chat if you have, if you want to get in contact with us or you have other inquiries. We're happy to kind of facilitate it offline too. I'll put the slide here shows my phone number, my email address, as well as Matthew's phone number and email address if you'd like to get in contact with us afterwards. But we'll go right into the questions. I'm sure there's plenty. All right.
Couple questions.
So yes, you can have a copy of the presentation. So what's the maximum length of a high-powered charger cable? So if a site can only have the trucks back into the site, we need a long cable. Yeah, that's right, Sean. Right now, I think the standard length for DC charging infrastructure is between 5 to 7 meters for cable lengths. But I understand like the trucks that are coming to market, they have like 8 to 9 meter trays from the port location to the back of the truck. So it's really around, can you, do you have to park the truck in back? Is there a way to have it kind of on the side of the truck, like petrol stations where you drive through? If that's possible, you might want to look at that. Otherwise, I believe the OEM can retrofit longer cables onto the chargers. So there's, it's still a work in progress, but there's a couple options there. I think it's down to the site as well as the charging provider in solving that. Are there any lighter charging cables available for DC chargers, such as cable arms to assist carrying the weight? Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for that question. So with DC chargers, they are quite heavy, especially as you get into the higher rated DCs. Personally, from experience, we were able to minimize the size of the DC charging cables for the Ocular brand specifically, so that it's more lightweight. It's not as heavy because if it's in public, for example, anyone could be using this. So the elderly, so you need to make sure that it's user friendly. When you start to go over that 180 kilowatt DC range, that's when you tend to have the assistance from the charger. So you'll come with like cable management that can help relieve the weight. So that's already, I believe it's already quite solved in industry, at least for a few OEMs that I can think of. Awesome. So Rajesh, how do you manage fire risk if the EV charging is indoor? Yeah, so that's a main common problem. Firstly, we kind of talk with the customer, understand the charging solution, and then we kind of work from there in understanding the NCC guidelines and what we can implement to make sure that it's a safe environment for fire safety too. If like a part of that is making sure where the chargers are located, if they're easily accessible to our side, fire or EV parking signage, also the master isolation switches, training. And then if you want to go further, there's the fire engineers that you can consult with that can provide a big feasibility report for you.
So next question is Ocular untethered charger on slide 8. So EVSE, so the question is if all of our chargers are tethered. We do both, so both untethered and tethered. So tethered means it's a permanently fixed cable to the charger, and untethered means that the user would have to bring a separate sort of
like a detachable
cable. Right.
Yeah, all DC chargers are tethered. That's just standard because the cables are heavier. AC, it comes in both universal or tethered. What EV units are currently able to be upgraded to the future specs that will allow that export of power from? Yeah, so like vehicle to grid. Good question. So we're actively looking at vehicle to grid prototypes later this year. We're hoping to have one in our Sydney office to be able to test and utilise. There is, I guess, steps needing to be taken around energy providers as well as around the OEMs. But in terms of what charging stations can be upgraded, what I know is the chargers we provide, they will need a physical PCB module implemented inside to upgrade them to V2G compatibility, but you don't need to replace the whole unit. So it's essentially just a PCB upgrade inside the ocular chargers. I think I answered, thanks Dan, just some information on the fire regulations. A lot of customers are asking for it. I can provide that to you. There's a nice one-pager on the internet by the NCC that kind of details what they find acceptable in terms of guidelines. Can the system be integrated with solar? So the charging stations can, but we don't really recommend it for commercial use. You want to install the chargers to the switchboards, and then the solar will be producing throughout the day. But for fleets, they can be operationally sensitive, and so you just want to make sure that they're getting as much electricity as possible. So you're not surprised when you get into the car and it's only 20%, because it's been shady all day, and they're designed just to take power from the solar. So we kind of have it as standard to the switchboards, and then the solar that generates will just back it up throughout the day.
Okay. So next question, if the communication network is disrupted, can the load management system allow for chargers to function in an offline mode with implemented demand management profile?
Yeah. I mean, so with load management, the great thing is there's both offline and online load management. Offline load management is you're just connecting the controller with data cable to the chargers, and there's no internet that you need. That's already a solution. So in that way, I guess it solves that question. And that's what we've been implementing quite frequently in a lot of sites, because it is the most reliable and it's the most instant. Like if something changes in terms of power, because it's physical data cabled, the response is like in a number of milliseconds. But I do know over the networked load management can take just a couple seconds delay. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Akensha. Andrew Brett, yeah, with fire regulations being proposed, look, we've done a couple sites with fire-related safety, like it's to do with master isolation switches, like panels and the boards. Not 100% across like where in the industry it's going, but we're following and keeping up to date. Like we want to be kind of the leader in providing EV fire safety. So we're actively watching it, but right now we've just kind of got access to what's available and being provided to the internet.
Cool. Next question. What are the cyber security considerations we need to consider when linking with a building management system?
Yeah, so building management, with cybersecurity, there's a range of different things you need to consider, like where is the data going, where is it stored? We make sure that the data is stored all within Australia on AWS services, and that it can be accessed only from Australia. I think that's a major cybersecurity question. We have some pretty good experts on answering that question better than me that I can let you know about, Leanne, but we've done a lot of work with like some large financial institutions as well as like Parliament House in Canberra. So the implementation of that, they obviously went through cybersecurity regulations and risks, but yeah, happy to provide our feedback after. Yeah, Sean. So load management technology, that's a good question. So you can actually do like priority load management. So when a vehicle plugs in, they can get the max amount of power if a vehicle's low on charging. What we're finding is where Europe is starting to bring out technology that has that you can actually understand the vehicle's battery percentage and be able to charge a vehicle faster based on that. So we're working actively with some European companies in bringing that technology to Australia.
And next question from David. So what chargers do Ocular active real-time load management systems work with? So
Yep.
That it is a charger that's agnostic, assuming they are a charger that's OCPP compatible or 2.0 compatible.
Yeah, that's a good question, David. So we have different types of load management. We have an ocular load management controller that works with the ocular chargers and is via physical data cable. But if you have a site that has different charging brands on it, firstly, they have to all be OCPP, correct? And two, that's where we implement our Exploren load controller or nucleus, where it's internet provided, which is a bit of a slower reaction, but that way it can connect to the different OCPP chargers and be able to downrate or uprate them. And that's through the online version of load management software. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, another question from Andrew. So it's regarding battery issues, trying to charge too fast, I guess, and leading to internal fractures, rupturing the batteries themselves. So has there been discussions about decreasing or limiting the maximum charge rate to reduce any potential for batteries failing?
Yeah, 100%. I think good practice is 80%, charging your vehicle up to 80% battery. It's good practice. It's good to model, I guess, your transition and what vehicles you get off that, because it still gives you that 20% leeway when you're actually there charging and battery degradation over several years. So I think modeling off 80% of a vehicle's battery capacity is a pretty smart move, and you can actually set internally on the vehicles to stop accepting charge past that limit. Okay.
Yep. So question from Fiona. Fiona's looking for circuitry requirements for a new apartment building. So do we have a metric for electric circuit capacity per parking spot, assuming that you're looking at future proofing and an allowance for one charger per bay? So
yeah, that's so for apartments, you typically look at the low range AC charging, so 7 kilowatts. That way you can install them all in the bays and it's not taking up too much power, but still provides a full charge overnight. Typically, a 7 kilowatt AC charger takes 32 amps.
Yep.
So 32 amps per bay is what you need to be able to monitor against. And then you can implement load management, which can effectively scale that out to 4 times the number of charges, because the load control can actually downrate those 32 amp charges to 8 amps if necessary. So that's how we model it. So firstly, understand how many amps you have available at site, how many charges you can put in without load management, and then how many charges you can put in with load management.
Yep. All right, a great question from Alan. So can chargers be locked off against charging by non-employees? So this is something I wanted to bring up in the presentation. So let's say your charger is on your site, but it's also accessible by the public. You don't want people just coming in and charging using your electricity. Yep. So there's a couple ways to do it, actually. So there's a physical way where you can actually lock the isolator with a lockable. So a charger, there's an isolator next to it, and you can actually lock that isolator so it can't be turned on and no one can charge. And then there's a second way, which is a software. So the software will require, for example, an RFID card or scanning on. So only verified persons can actually get onto that charger. So sometimes it's as simple as a tap and you're able to use it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And that's both offline and online. So if you didn't want a software and you wanted to restrict it, we can make a charger that essentially all you have to do is tap your card on, no internet.
Beautiful. Yeah, so for home charging, thanks, Mitchell. Yeah, so the good thing about wall boxes is that you can easily take the wall mount off. So it's a back plate, you install the charger, but you can easily take it off if, say, the staff leaves the company. Do you have any examples of workplaces providing home charging to staff? Yes, yeah, I can send you through some information, Mitchell. But how it works is we have a standard rate for installation for homes because most homes are set up pretty similar. So there's the install piece. We would have the smart charger, and then we would just have it connected to internet with software. There's different rates that you can reimburse them. Like some companies just set a hard limit going, look, we'll reimburse you for 25 cents per kilowatt hour. Anything above that you pay, but just to kind of keep consistency across all of our staff, because the thing is every home might have a different provider. So that's one method that they've been able to provide. And then when they leave, they can just essentially give you back the charging station. You do have to keep the electrical infrastructure there. You can't like rip out all the wires.
Question from Jim. So how well can you mix fleet and some public charging on the same system? So combined with the home charging or fleet, for example, train stations for public and head office for fleet.
Yeah, that's perfectly achievable through the software. Yeah. So you can have charging stations that are publicly accessible. You can even have it for your internal fleet from business hours, and then outside of the business hours is when the public can access it. So there's a lot of flexibility with the software platform, but that's essentially what it's for. Like you could have your CEO charges for free, your employees charge it at a discounted rate, and then the general public, they charge at the full rate. So there's a range of different things that you can do. Happy to kind of go into that in a bit more detail. I do know that the software, people can have a lot of questions.
Quite flexible. So
there's a lot you can do with
yeah.
it.
That's right. And we've got another question from an unknown user for the case study on load management. What's the question there? Does the load management system limit the charger capacity based on the tenancy distribution board or the DNSP connection point shared by other tenancies?
So if this is for an apartment or for a big complex of different workplaces, we put it on the big main switchboard. We put CT clamps around the incoming mains from the street or the transformer, and we monitor everything that goes on. So your aircon, your refrigeration, your kettles might all be turning on, and then the chargers will have to down rate. So we base it off the main switchboard capacity. So say it's a 400 amp board, we would set the load control slightly under like 380 just to give a bit of leeway, and then it tells the chargers what to do.
Yeah, same principle. And then question from Rich. What are your suggestions for best car park layout for underground charging, near exit, spaced out chargers, or grouped in one corner?
Yeah, it's good question, right?
Depend on the site, I guess, and understanding how close it is to your switchboard, because we always want to minimize the cost of installation. And that's something when you have an electrician down there with you, you can speak about that with him.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Understanding firstly, cost-wise, what makes the most sense, then logistically wise, what makes the most sense too. So using those two, generally you can come to a bit of a solution. Then you take into account fire safety, and if possible, you can rearrange the bays to have them in a location that fits all three of those. But those are generally, Mitch, the three things I would consider, and that's what we kind of talk with customers about, and to find them like the right position and the right site. Yeah. Generally, if you want to have the chargers, we have them next to each other as well. So say you're getting 5 charging stations, we would have those 5 bays next to each other, but it can depend. Traditionally, just dedicating that area to EVs makes a lot of sense. And people that drive petrol vehicles, they go, okay, cool. Like I'll just park in the non-EV base.
Cool. Is this next question?
Yep.
Okay, so
do the dedicated switchboards and the load management controllers need to be in a fire-rated cupboard in a basement car park or surface mounted as shown in the photos on slide 20 with a bollard in front? So there's no regulation yet for having them in fire-rated cupboards in basements. That would be down to the site and what the fire engineers recommend. We do protect chargers with bollards, so people don't back into them, because it's a big investment, and you want to make sure that putting a $200 bollard in front is able to protect that $1,000 or $2,000 investment. So surface mounted bollards, wheel stops is what we recommend. EV signage, bay painting, so people know not to park there if they're not driving an EV. And then obviously around the load management and the switchboards, not a requirement for fire cupboards, but that's something that we'd take down to the engineers as well as to the site.
Cool. Question from Alan. How much does it cost to actually install AC chargers and DC chargers? And how much time is needed to administer workplace chargers? So the cost does vary quite significantly, actually. So AC chargers, you're looking at in the range of between 2,000 to maybe 4,000 for an AC system.
Yep.
To have that fully installed, and obviously, of course, that's a general sort of price, but it does depend on your site. So that's that sort of range, a very rough estimate. But with DC charging, it depends on how many kilowatts you need. Let's say the most common is about 60 kilowatts, and we're looking at for about $15,000 to have one of those installed is a rough estimate.
Yeah.
On the more conservative side, saying that's more expensive, but yeah, that's what we've seen.
Yeah, and that's right. Like, I think in terms of how quickly you can administer workplace charges, making sure that your charging provider has available charging stations in stock is one advantage for just being able to implement it within 3 weeks. But obviously there's due diligence around the site inspection, then getting the proposal together and walking through you, Alan, what the steps are and what we've recommended. And then after that, kind of saying yes and moving forward with the install. That's kind of the steps. It could take maybe a month, if we're a month to like have it all ready to go, and then we can install it. But yeah, obviously down to how quick you want it happening, as well as when the stock is available.
Cool. Okay. Question from Peter. What is the purpose of RFID in the Parliament House job, and what is the relationship to access requirements?
Yeah, good question. So RFID is for like fleet drivers to be able to be reimbursed, pretty much. So they can, they don't have to pay. Essentially, they can be reimbursed to be able to track and monitor, and then for that electricity, just like a normal workplace, right? It's a standard, I guess, offering. It's in replication to the fuel card experience. It makes a lot of sense.
Question from E1. Do you also install the solar and battery storage as part of the EV charging process for a residential owner?
Right, so for residential, we simply just do the EV charging side. However, we have a lot of contacts with solar installers who also install chargers and batteries. So I think from our perspective, we just do the charging. We focus on it. We're experts in it, but we can get you in contact with providers that do provide the solar and batteries.
Okay, and another question from Dan. Have you seen any data on the general uptake or usage of a charger once installed?
Yeah, so that's what that software platform is for. It's crazy. So we have actually some documents for both AC and DC on return on investment. So how much electricity, or how much it costs them to install and supply and install them, and then how much activity they've had over the last year. And what we've found is having a DC charger in public can be quite beneficial. You can earn a lot of revenue because it's a high turnover rate, especially if it's located in an area. Especially if it's located in an area that has not many people, not many charging stations, but it's next to a highway. It's really those sites are pretty beneficial.
Okay.
Cybersecurity assessments for public charging sessions. Anita, so I mean, so in terms of the software, it's all stored within Australian web services, so Amazon Web Services within Australia. Might need more detail on that, but for public charging sessions, we don't keep any of the, like, I guess, core or important data. We just have to keep the bare basics to be able to sign you up to the platform so you can charge. Okay, we're near the end. Can the charger RFID cards be incorporated into existing RFID swipe passes for an organization? They can. It depends on the type of RFID that works with the charger's RFID. So essentially, for us to know if we can, we will just need to maybe have that sent that over and test it, or send us the details of the actual card. But it's possible. We've done it before for like golf clubs, for example, and it makes things a bit easier where they can use the RFID for their golf club, but also to start the charging sessions.
Okay. Question from Dan. How are you finding businesses manage the cars overstaying in EV spots and no EV cars parking in bays?
Yeah, so that's fine. The way to manage that is by billing them on time. So you can bill them on cents per kilowatt hour. You can also bill them time-based to incentivize them to move their vehicles. And that tends to work well because people don't like paying money that they don't have to. So they tend to move their vehicles pretty quickly.
Okay.
And then ballpark, what are the costs of an EV board that serves 24 car spaces? I'm no electrician. Gavin, but
But what is the cost of a load management controller? That's a good question. So a load controller,
that's a good
it can depend on how many charges you're looking to have. So the more charges, the slightly higher the cost. At EVSE, we do load control for around 1,500 XGST, and then on top of that, there's an ongoing cost per year. It's about $500 XGST, and that's for about 10 charges, up to 10 charges.
Yep.
It costs a little more for additional charges, but that way you have load control in your building.
Absolutely. That's the end of the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope you learned a bit of something. There's a lot of information here that we will send you. If you have any inquiries or questions, just please reach out. We're happy to help. Even if you're at the beginning of your journey, we understand it. We've helped people in the same situation as yourself. So yeah, have a great day, guys. Thanks for hopping on, and see ya.
Thank you, everyone.
See you guys.